So I think establishing a good customer base, or trying to really get your brand in India is definitely a good idea. Less than half the population right now really doesn't buy online. That's what I was reading about. So,
and that's going to change, right?
That's going to
keep going up.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. So you'd be crazy not to be investing in India. Hey, Aaron, welcome to the Decoding Cross-Border Ecommerce podcast by Zonos. And, I love Indian food.
Oh, me too. Me too. It's one of my favorites.
It took my wife like 10 years into our marriage to even eat it. We had a couple invite us out to dinner, and she was too embarrassed not to eat it. So she went, and now she loves Indian food.
Oh, my almost exact same story. Thai food, I had to get my wife converted to that. Then Indian food, now she butter chicken all day long for her.
Ooh, I love butter chicken. Mm-hmm. Well, hey, today we want to talk about e-commerce selling into India. So selling into India. I can talk about Indian food all day. What do you call an Indian dish that's always getting in trouble?
What's that?
Non-compliant.
But garlic or regular?
Garlic.
All right. Me too. I've been to India.
Yeah, you have.
I have. I was there for about a day and a half. I think we swooped in to visit some people for work. Went to Bangalore. It was a cultural experience. I'll tell you that. Great people. We actually went and did some recreation activity there, and I got on the top 10 chart for the go-kart track and a rock climbing wall. But no, it was the craziest driving experience of my life, and I'm glad I wasn't driving. I just got an Uber. The traffic and everything, it's what you see on TV is real. There's full families on a scooter, white weaving through traffic. There's no laws. They have lines painted on the roads, as I'm not sure why, but because nobody follows them. If it's a 3-lane road, you're 5 cars wide, and with scooters full of families weaving between. It's
that's just
unbelievable. And you honk. It's just constant honking to let people know
what does the honking
doing.
achieve?
It's a way to communicate, like letting people know where you're at, what you're doing.
Okay.
All that. There's a code I don't fully understand, but I was in the back seat just in awe of the whole thing. So very different. In fact, sorry, I'm going to labor this point just a little more. But we had, talking to a former coworker who moved from India to Canada. And she was so stressed out about driving in Canada. Do you know why?
Why?
Because of all the rules she had to
stay
follow.
Between the lines.
Yeah. It was stressful. So, anyways.
Well, how was customs? Did you get to meet customs?
Oh my gosh. On this trip, I had the complete opposite ends of efficiency when it comes to getting through customs. Went through Dubai. Talking state of the art. You just basically walk through, hardly even stop, hardly even held up. In India, both security and customs and immigration was probably the least efficient thing I've ever been through in my life. It was all still paperwork, stamp, just waiting in line. It's like the sloth on, is it Zootopia?
Zootopia.
That's the movie? Yeah. It was kind of like that kind of experience. So, but overall, great country, but you can tell they got a few things to work out to get through the airport a little more efficiently than they do now. Luckily, the Emirates Air person kind of ushered me, because I got held up by a COVID test that wasn't coming through. This is kind of during the COVID stuff. My results wouldn't come through. Everybody else I was with came through. Mine were delayed for whatever reason. So they came through in the 11th hour, and luckily the Emirates Air person, rushed me up to the front of the security line so I could at least get through. But crazy.
Well, it sounds the physical experience you had going into India, I think, is very similar to an e-commerce experience, but it is reflective of the government there, which is, I think they're kind of pragmatic, but protectionist, and they're protectionist of their industries, and so it's a little bit of work to import into India. They try to make it easy to export, but so let's dive into that. Let's India is huge.
The biggest.
Over 1 billion people.
Mm-hmm.
This is a massive market. But I think we took a look and our average customer is probably doing less than 1% of their business into India, which I know you want to touch on a little bit there, some of the reasons why. But let's start with where we usually start, de minimis value.
What de minimis value?
Okay. All right. We're already on to the next topic then, huh?
They're going to charge their money one way or another. So it doesn't matter how
doesn't matter
big
the
shipment
value.
is.
They are going to charge and collect duty and taxes into India.
Yep.
Taxes. What is the tax to India?
On the imports, they charge what's called an IGST. Okay. Typically, it's about 18%. It varies, but the typical is 18%. However, on B2C e-commerce shipments, they have a whole clearance process where it's a simplified clearance, and they charge the highest rate on B2C e-commerce, which is 28%. So almost every shipment we see is 28%. If it's a B2C personal shipment.
So this is somewhat similar to Brazil, right? We talked about Brazil in another podcast, and where they just come up with a simplified duty. Doesn't matter what the HS code is, they're just going to charge this duty rate. In fact, do they use a specific code to apply the 28%?
I want to say they came up with their own code in chapter 98. It's like a 9804 or something. I didn't look that up before this, but it's an HS code that they use on all personal shipments. So it doesn't matter if you're a t-shirt in chapter 61 or something else. If they're clearing it, if it's a personal shipment, they just clear it all under the same HS code, which then drives the same duty rate and same taxes for everything. So
the difference in Brazil is they have simplified duty. This is like simplified tax applied in a similar way.
Yeah, okay. The whole thing is just simplified for them. Mm-hmm. Duty and tax.
Wait, so the simplified duty is 35%?
35%.
Okay, well, we're jumping to duty, and we weren't even done with tax. Okay.
No. So should we unpack tax real quick?
Yes.
So tax is 28%. That's the simplified.
Yep. CIF.
Which typically is more for luxury goods and stuff, the 28% rate, but on B2C, they
just throw everything in that category.
Yeah, it's all, if it's a personal shipment, it all clears with that one HS code and gets charged 28%. That's on the CIF value and the duty.
And CIF, just to remind the audience, that's the product, that's the shipping, that's the insurance, cost of insurance.
Yep.
The cost of the goods, insurance, freight. So,
yep.
Okay.
And then they have a simplified duty, which is 35%.
No, but they have other taxes, right? But these aren't applying coming in, right? Like the central goods and services or the state goods and services, the CGST, the SGST.
Those are more like domestic transactions. On the import, it'll be the IGST. Now, however, those can come into play when there's brokerage services or things that are happening inside of India. Those would get charged that CGST, SGST,
which is kind of the government centralized tax. It'll just get applied to the
So there's
to the service that was provided, the clearance.
And it's kind of a combination of what you see in like Canada and others, where there's some state taxes as well as kind of, the federal or centralized government taxes, and that's typically so like you might see fees that are brokerage fees and things that are services happening inside of India, that would be usually charged around 18%. But the 28% IGST is on all the goods that are actually moving across the border.
Okay. Well, this...
Did I make that confusing enough?
Yes.
Okay.
No, it's just expensive, so far on the taxes.
Very expensive.
It's adding up.
Very expensive.
All right. So let's maybe jump into the duty a little bit. The basic customs duty is what they call it, right? Like this is the simplified duty. 35%. They're using a different code. Now, it used to be 10%, correct?
It did a handful of years ago. It was 10%. Yep.
And what's the there's a social welfare surcharge too, right? Do you know what this is for?
I don't know exactly where it goes to. I mean, I would where it's supposed to go to. I'd imagine it's a social welfare kind of program. But honestly, I don't know the ins and outs of it. Do you know the ins and outs of it?
No.
I just know it's 10% of the duty.
Of the duty.
Not of the product or anything, just the duty.
I mean, it sounds like it's something that is used. They're protecting some of their industries, right? So social welfare surcharge for importing something to the country. Yeah, that would be my guess.
Yeah, and it's just 10% of that 35% duty.
Yep.
So it's not It's not massive, but it adds up.
And then countervailing duty is similar. You could have that depending on if they're trying to protect an industry. So CVD, special additional duty is 4% on some goods. I don't know what the difference is, what's a special additional duty is. Why wouldn't you just use a countervailing duty? I don't know. Compensation cess is on certain products too.
Yeah, we don't see much of that in the B2C world. On commercial shipments, I think there's a lot of other things that come into play, like lower duty rates and lower tax rates. To start with.
So how if I really want to sell into India, and be successful there, what would be some of your suggestions based on how expensive this is getting, with all of the duty and kind of how everything gets simplified? You're getting a higher duty rate, all of that.
So what you got over 1 billion people. Not all of them have money, right? But some do, and those will still buy cross-border. But if you really want to tap into that market, doing individual B2C shipments cross-border into India is a lot more expensive. But to do anything other than that, you have to really have a good market fit and have a lot of volume and a lot of demand from India. And at that point, it makes sense to put inventory in India.
All right. So this is, and we have people ask us this a lot, like at what point should I inventory in this country? And India, I can totally see the cost benefit to that. A lot of times I think,
sometimes it's flipped. There's other places where there's actually, because of de minimis and other things,
right,
it's actually advantageous to do cross-border with individual shipments in.
Yeah.
But India is kind of the opposite, where they actually penalize the individual shipments on to consumers. So
I'm always surprised though to Canada, not to jump to Canada real quick, but for this scenario, how often people think it's going to save them to put it in Canada versus just shipping directly.
Right.
Yeah. That's one of those where, if you do it right, I think you can still keep your costs down without having to inventory a ton of stuff in Canada.
Totally.
But
yep. India, on the other hand, there's no harm. It's actually, to do the calculations and everything, it's expensive, but just offering it for sale to India for the few people that want to, spend the money, go for it. Right. There's no harm in that. But if you see a ton of demand, that's where you may want to take a deeper dive in actually putting inventory there.
So what, all right, let's on average, how much more above the product price that you're selling it do you think?
Yeah. So
this is the total landed cost is going to be.
So if you take the CIF value, it's usually about 72% of that CIF value. So let's just do some math real quick. You got an $80 t-shirt. That Mars Attacks t-shirt is in high demand.
Yes.
So it's $80. Let's do $20 in shipping, which is actually pretty good rate going to India. So you got $100 CIF. First thing you're going to do is 35% duty. So there's $35.
Okay.
Then you're going to do 10% on that, right?
So now $350.
Another $350. So now we're up to $38.50. Then you're going to do 28% of that. So $138.50, add 28% of that. So here, I'm going to pull my calculator out because I'm not that good at math here, okay? So $138.50, right?
Yep.
And I'm going to add
28%.
28%. So now you're at $177.28. So yeah, 77% on top of the CIF. Yeah. So how much was your t-shirt?
$80.
How much are the duty and taxes? Almost $80, right? And you increase the shipping costs or anything like that, like it's not uncommon to have the duty and tax be as much or more than the actual product.
Yeah. Well, we had a call from an Indian shopper the other day. They're shopping on an Indian restaurant website, buying food stuff, and they were complaining about how expensive it was. And do you know what their response was? Because it was so expensive to buy.
What's that?
It's a non-starter.
Is that garlic naan?
Okay. Now, it definitely expensive going there. Mm-hmm. There are some trade agreements, but I mean, if you're in the US, I'm sorry, like that's not going to be, and even the trade agreements there often are reduced duty, maybe not, you'll get some zero duty between some trade agreements, but I want to talk a little bit more about some of the most impactful costs of going to India. Mm-hmm. One of the things we like to touch on these, because we do have these, we have an Indian country guide that goes through a lot of what we're talking about today. But let's talk about the carriers and some of their fees, because that's usually the unexpected costs you have going in. I know you did some research on FedEx, UPS, DHL. So talk to me a little bit about the remote area surcharges, because India is a big place.
Yep.
And yes, there's a lot of, when you're going to a metropolitan, city or something, you're going to be okay. Not going to get probably any additional surcharges. But how much can that cost? Like, is it that expensive? How much like FedEx, going to cost me if I'm shipping to a remote area inside of India?
They do it all a little different. So, UPS it's rupees, right? I got the currency right here. So
yeah,
2,304 rupees.
That sounds like a lot.
It's about $27, or 36 rupees per kilogram, whichever one's greater. So e-commerce, you're going to hit that minimum charge almost every time, which is around $27. FedEx is tiered. It can go anywhere from 265 rupees up to just over 2,000. So you're anywhere between $3 and $24.
So actually significantly
it's cheaper
than UPS.
Mm-hmm. And then DHL just kind of has one, which is $2,350 is their minimum charge, which is around $24. So
expensive.
It's really expensive if you're
shipping
on
to DHL, you said was $2,350.
$2,350 rupees, which is about $24.
It's $28. I think.
Oh my gosh, it's $28.
So they are the most expensive of the. They're the most expensive of the three.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if you're shipping to a lot of remote areas, something definitely to pay attention to. It's a big country. Granted, a lot of the population is centralized in some of these cities. So just the nature of your product will dictate how often you actually have to deal with these. But
I skipped past the advancement fees or disbursement fees, which is when a package is getting cleared, the broker has to advance money to customs, and they charge to do that advancement. Mm-hmm. So FedEx.
Yep. It's 2% of that duty and tax amount, which now becomes a little more relevant because the duty and taxes are so high.
Oh, so on this shirt, it's just another $2.
It'd be 2% of the $77.
Oh, yeah. Of the 77. Okay, yep.
Or 800 rupees, whichever one's greater. And I think that came out to be around $9-10, something like that, if I'm not mistaken.
So in this case, it's going to be the $10, and then that's the charge. That $10 is going to get the centralized service tax.
Yep. So that will
CGST will be applied to that
CGST
amount.
And SGST, which is combined 18%.
Okay.
So that's where you get those are services happening inside of India.
Yep.
So they don't get the 28% IGST; they get the 18%.
Okay.
UPS is really close to the same. It's 2.5% of the duty and tax instead of 2%, and then it's 750 rupees is the minimum charge. So super close. And then DHL is, and that will also get that CGST and SGST. Now DHL is different. Instead of applying this fee inside of India like the other carriers do, it's a billing charge that happens after the fact. So all the duty and taxes come back and it gets billed to you on your account. So if I'm shipping from the US, everywhere I ship to is charged on the same rate. So, and also since it's something happening when it gets back here to bill me in the US or whatever country you're in, it actually won't get that India tax because it's not a service that's happening in India.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a kind of roundabout savings there, possibly, but it's $17.50 if you're in the US, right?
17.
Yep. And then Australia, do you remember what it is in Australia?
Like 30.
It's like 30.
Like 30 Australian dollars. So it ends up
which
being over
probably
$20.
Still, over $20. And India is a pretty big destination for a lot of Australian sellers. But yeah, I mean, that's DHL depends. I mean, everything we're talking about depends all the time. Okay, let's as we kind of wrap up here, there isn't a lot of. I looked into what would be relevant for restricted items, and they have some restrictions on fabrics and things like that. But I think it's mostly around trying to protect their own industry. So you just have the right paperwork in place, and again, that's probably going to be in the B2B area, not the B2C. But And anything else that we missed on India that you wanted to cover today that was you thought really important? Besides, or do you have any new jokes for us?
I don't have any new jokes.
Okay.
No, but I can tell you India is massive and kind of an emerging market. So just things can change, right? But that's where offer your goods at least for sale. You might not get very much now, and then pay attention. And it's an economy and market. It's a huge population that maybe one day will become relevant to you. And so there's no harm in at least offering your goods for sale into India for those that can afford it.
I think something some people do worry about at times is fraud. But even I wouldn't say that India is, though I think there sometimes you have the fraudsters that are trying to defraud somebody outside the country. Like I don't see a lot of e-commerce fraud into India. I mean, it's still a higher elevated than some of the main countries like a Canada or Australia or things like that. But I don't think it's one of the worst offenders. So I would agree with you. I think that selling in India would be really important. Like you said, things change and things could open up. So I think establishing a good customer base or, trying to really get your brand into India is definitely a good idea, because I think that less than half the population right now really doesn't buy online. That's what I was reading about. So,
and that's going to change, right?
That's going to
keep going up.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. So you'd be crazy not to be investing in India.
Do you want to hear a couple more stories from India though?
Yes.
So in all this crazy driving, right? We're in the middle of a city and a cow is in the middle of the road, in the middle of the city. And everyone just stops because it's a cow. And you just wait for the cow to finally move. So that was fascinating. The other thing that was fascinating to me was on this go-kart track, right? The expectation I had was, man, if you can drive on these roads, you should be really good at driving a go-kart track. But somehow they were horrible. I mean,
at driving on the go-kart.
Driving a go-kart.
Which is why you're in the top 10, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking crashing into the tires all over the place. I'm like, how can you navigate these roads and not navigate a go-kart track? But maybe there's just too many lines to have to stay within, and they kept crashing into all the tires and stuff. It was fascinating.
Did you have to sign anything to do the go-karts?
Yeah.
A non-disclosure?
A non-disclosure, yes. Yes. Oh, the non-jokes. They keep going. But yeah, honestly, it was a fascinating country to visit. A lot of people there, great people. It's worth selling into, but just know that if you're doing just individual shipments to start, you're not going to have a ton of success there. It's going to be expensive, but there are people that are willing to buy. And then, see what your demand is, and you can adjust your plans as you move forward, as you see demand. But India is not the number one destination I'd put on my list for countries to go to, but it's definitely one I'd still have.
And it's one you want to understand. And that's why I think this podcast is important, because you should be selling there, but it is complicated, right? Even though it sounds, there's simplified things, it's expensive. There's a lot of nuances. And one other thing too, as we wrap up, a lot of times we don't see them apply the brokers don't always apply rules the same, it seems like. Or at times, like maybe they'll get the old 10%, or maybe there's some reasons why they do that. But it's one you want to look out for. But definitely a lot of opportunity.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thanks, Aaron. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Clint.